Henderson Ranch, Nebraska, Friday, October 13th, 6:45 a.m. The livestock trailer rumbled down the gravel driveway of Henderson Ranch, its massive cargo shifting restlessly inside as the driver navigated the final turn toward the loading pens. Jim Henderson looked up from his morning coffee, squinting through the kitchen window at the unexpected arrival. "Martha, you expecting any deliveries today?" he called to his wife, who was already gathering her coat from the hook by the door. "Nothing scheduled," Martha replied, but she was already walking toward the trailer with the purposeful stride of someone who'd spent 40 years dealing with livestock transport. GPS probably sent another driver to the wrong address. At 67, Jim Henderson ran a modest 500-acre operation in central Nebraska, primarily corn and soybeans with a small herd of commercial Angus cattle. Nothing fancy, nothing that would warrant the kind of premium livestock trailer now backing up to his cattle pens. The rig looked expensive, the kind used for transporting breeding stock worth more than most people's houses. The driver climbed down from the cab, clipboard in hand, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool October morning. "Mr. Henderson, I've got your delivery from Whitmore Genetics. 1 Wagyu bull, registration number WG2E847. Jim nearly choked on his coffee. "Son, I think you've got the wrong address. I didn't order any Wagyu bull, and I sure as hell couldn't afford one if I did." The driver, a young man named Tyler Brooks, who'd been hauling livestock for 3 years, checked his paperwork again. The delivery address clearly read Henderson Ranch, Route 47, Plainfield, Nebraska. The GPS had brought him directly here, and this was definitely the Henderson Ranch sign at the end of the driveway. "Says here you paid $85,000 for premium breeding stock," Tyler said, showing Jim the transport manifest. "Full-blood Wagyu bull, imported bloodlines, certified for artificial insemination programs." Martha whistled low. $85,000? Jim, that's more than we paid for our first house. "And our second house," Jim added dryly. "Tyler, there's been a mistake. I run commercial cattle, not a genetics operation. You need to check with your dispatcher." But even as Jim protested, his eyes were drawn to the trailer where something massive was moving inside. Through the ventilation slats, he could see glimpses of black hide and the distinctive compact build that marked Japanese beef breeds. Whatever was in that trailer was no ordinary bull. Tyler was already on his radio, speaking in the clipped tones that marked professional drivers dealing with complications. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I've got a problem at the Henderson delivery. Customer says he didn't order this animal." The radio crackled back with static and the voice of a harried dispatcher. "Unit 47, double-check your paperwork. That's an $85,000 animal, and Whitmore Genetics doesn't make mistakes on deliveries that size. Paperwork shows Henderson Ranch, Route 47, Plainfield. That's where I am. But the customer is saying, 'Hold on, Unit 47. The radio went silent for several long minutes while Tyler, Jim, and Martha stood in the growing morning light, the weight of an expensive mistake settling around them like fog. Finally, the dispatcher's voice returned, noticeably less confident. "Unit 47, we've got a problem. There are 2 Henderson ranches on Route 47. You're at the wrong one. James Henderson in Plainfield, not Jackson Henderson in Fairfield. You're 30 miles off course." Tyler's face went pale. "What do you want me to do? It's going to take me 2 hours to reload and drive to the correct address." "Negative on reload. That bull's been in transport for 14 hours already. Federal regulations require offloading for rest and water. You'll have to leave him there overnight and reload tomorrow morning." Jim Henderson found himself staring at the trailer containing a bull worth more than his annual farm income, realizing that through nothing more than similar names and GPS confusion, he was about to become the temporary guardian of one of the most valuable pieces of livestock in the state. "Now hold on," Jim said into Tyler's radio. "I don't have facilities for an animal like that. My pens are set up for commercial cattle, not breeding stock worth more than a luxury car." The dispatcher's response carried the weary tone of someone who dealt with similar problems before. "Mr. Henderson, I understand your concerns, but federal transport regulations are clear. The animal must be offloaded for mandatory rest period. Whitmore Genetics will cover any reasonable costs for temporary housing and care." Martha stepped closer to the trailer, her experienced eye noting the animal's condition through the slats. "Jim, look at him. He's stressed from the long haul. We can't leave him in there any longer." Jim knew she was right. 40 years of raising cattle had taught him to read the signs of transport stress, and the bull in that trailer needed to be offloaded whether he was prepared for it or not. "All right," Jim said finally. "But I want everything in writing. Insurance coverage, liability protection, the works. And someone from Whitmore Genetics needs to be here first thing tomorrow morning to collect their property." Tyler was already lowering the trailer ramp, revealing the interior where a magnificent Wagyu bull stood with the patient dignity of an animal accustomed to being valuable. The bull was smaller than Jim's commercial Angus. Wagyu were bred for meat quality, not size. But there was something in his carriage that spoke of generations of careful breeding and genetic perfection. "What's his name?" Martha asked, noting the detailed health certificates attached to the transport papers. "Yoshida's Black Diamond," Tyler read from the manifest. 5 years old, imported from Japan 3 years ago. Current value assessed at $85,000 for breeding purposes. As they guided Black Diamond from the trailer into Jim's largest pen, the bull moved with calm intelligence, his dark eyes taking in the new surroundings without panic or aggression. Here was an animal that had been handled by professionals his entire life, accustomed to being treated like the living treasure he represented. "Well, Diamond," Jim said, checking the water trough and hay supply, "looks like you're spending the night with us common folk. Try not to let it hurt your aristocratic feelings." The bull's response was a soft snort that might have been amusement, and Jim found himself wondering what the morning would bring when Whitmore Genetics discovered that their prize bull had spent the night at a humble commercial operation instead of the high-end facility they'd intended. Dave Morrison arrived at his store 15 minutes early, coffee in hand, to check on the unexpected overnight guest in his back pen. Lone Star Diamond was standing calmly near the water trough, having consumed about half the premium hay Dave had provided the night before. "At least you didn't try to break down any fences," Dave said, inspecting the pen perimeter. The bull looked up briefly, then returned to methodically chewing hay with the efficient movements of an animal on a feeding schedule. Carol arrived shortly after, carrying a folder of insurance documents she'd printed from the emails Premier Genetics had sent overnight. They sent the liability coverage, veterinary contact information, and confirmation that their representative will be here by 8:30. "Good. The sooner we get this sorted out, the better." Dave had spent most of the night worrying about potential complications, injury, escape, property damage, any of which could create serious problems for his small business. At 8:20 a.m., a white pickup truck with Premier Genetics logos pulled into the parking lot. The driver, a woman in her 30s wearing ranch clothes and company identification, approached the store entrance. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Sarah Chen, field coordinator for Premier Genetics. I'm here about the delivery mix-up." Dave led her to the back pen where Lone Star Diamond was finishing his morning hay. Sarah conducted a quick visual inspection, checking the bull's condition and noting his calm demeanor. "He looks good. No stress indicators, eating normally, staying hydrated. You've taken good care of him." Sarah pulled out her tablet and began documenting the situation. "I need to get some paperwork signed and arrange transport to the correct customer." "How did this happen exactly?" Carol asked. Sarah showed them the original order form on her tablet. David Morrison of Morrison Ranch submitted his order online 3 weeks ago. When he filled out the delivery address, he typed Route 12 instead of Route 21, where his ranch is actually located. Our system accepted the address because it was a valid street address with a business listing. "What about verification calls?" Dave asked. "We tried calling the phone number he provided, but he transposed one digit there too. The call went to a disconnected number, so our customer service marked it as confirmed delivery when no one called back to change the arrangements. It was a straightforward case of human error compounded by insufficient verification protocols. Exactly the kind of mistake that happened regularly in business, though rarely involving such expensive consequences. The real customer has been calling us since yesterday afternoon wondering where his bull was," Sarah continued. "He's driving here now to pick up the animal and complete the transfer." 20 minutes later, another pickup truck arrived, this one pulling a livestock trailer. A man in his 50s got out looking frustrated but relieved. "David Morrison," he said, introducing himself to Dave Morrison. Sorry about the mix-up. I've been expecting this bull for 3 weeks, and when he didn't show up yesterday, I thought something had gone wrong. The two Morrisons compared notes on the address error while Sarah Chen coordinated the transfer paperwork. It turned out that David Morrison, the rancher, had been in such a hurry to complete the online order that he'd made multiple typos without double-checking his information. I was trying to get the order in before the early payment discount expired, David the rancher explained. Rushing through the form was a stupid mistake that cost everyone time and trouble. These things happen, Dave the feed store owner replied. At least everything worked out without any problems. The loading process took another 30 minutes. Lone Star Diamond walked calmly up the trailer ramp, apparently no worse for his unexpected night at a feed store. Premier Genetics handled all the documentation, insurance claims, and verification that no damage had occurred to their valuable animal. Sarah Chen presented Dave with a check for $200 to cover the cost of premium hay and any inconvenience. Premier Genetics appreciates your cooperation in resolving this situation. We've also updated our verification protocols to prevent similar mix-ups. What changes are you making? Carol asked. Double verification of delivery addresses through phone calls, GPS coordinate confirmation for rural deliveries, and requiring customers to confirm their contact information before we process high-value orders, Sarah explained. This mistake cost us more in transport fees and coordination time than the improvements will cost to implement. After both trucks had departed, Dave and Carol returned to their normal business routine. The back pen was empty again, ready for the next feed delivery or equipment staging. The whole incident had lasted less than 20 hours, but it had highlighted how quickly small errors could create expensive complications. You know what's interesting? Carol said as she updated their daily records. That bull was probably the most valuable thing that's ever been on our property, and nothing dramatic happened. He ate hay, drank water, and waited to be picked up. Sometimes the most expensive problems have the most boring solutions, Dave replied. Communication, documentation, and following proper procedures. No heroes needed. Their phone rang with the first customer call of the day, a local farmer needing feed for his cattle. Dave pulled up the inventory system, confirmed the order details, and scheduled delivery to the correct address. After yesterday's mix-up, he found himself double-checking address information more carefully than usual. The story would become a minor legend among local farmers and ranchers, the time Morrison Feed Supply accidentally hosted an $85,000 bull overnight. But the reality was simpler than the story. A customer made data entry errors, a company's verification procedures failed, and everyone involved worked together to resolve the situation professionally. Premier Genetics implemented their protocol improvements within 2 weeks. David Morrison, the rancher, got his expensive bull without further complications, and Dave Morrison, the feed store owner, had a new appreciation for the importance of accuracy in customer information systems. The only lasting change was a small addition to Morrison Feed Supply's customer order forms, a checkbox requiring customers to confirm their delivery address before completing purchase orders. Sometimes the best response to an expensive mistake is making sure it can't happen again. Jennifer Walsh sat at her desk reviewing the incident report from the Morrison delivery mix-up, along with 3 other similar cases that had occurred in the past 6 months. As customer service manager for Premier Genetics, she was tasked with analyzing patterns in delivery errors and recommending system improvements to prevent costly mistakes. The Morrison case cost us $200 in additional transport fees, coordination time, and compensation, she told Mark Stevens, the operations manager, during their weekly review meeting. But it's part of a larger pattern we need to address. Mark pulled up the delivery error statistics on his laptop. What are you seeing? Address errors account for 23% of our delivery complications. Phone number errors add another 15%. Most customers rush through online forms to meet early payment deadlines, and our current verification system isn't catching the mistakes until it's too late. The numbers were clear, but not dramatic. Premier Genetics completed over 800 livestock deliveries annually, with an overall error rate of less than 3%. However, when each error involved animals worth $50,000 to $150,000, even small percentages translated to significant costs. What's your recommendation? Mark asked. Jennifer had spent 2 weeks researching verification systems used by other logistics companies. 3-tier verification, automated address validation during online ordering, mandatory phone confirmation within 24 hours, and GPS coordinate verification for rural deliveries. Implementation cost would be about $8,000, but it should reduce delivery errors by 80%. Timeline for implementation? 6 weeks for system development, 2 weeks for staff training. We could have it operational by January 1st. Mark approved the project, noting that preventing 4 delivery errors annually would cover the implementation costs. The decision was purely economic. Reducing mistakes saved money and improved customer satisfaction ratings. Meanwhile, at Morrison Feed Supply, Dave Morrison was dealing with an unexpected consequence of the bull delivery mix-up. Word had spread through the local farming community, and several customers had asked about his temporary livestock boarding services. "We're not setting up a boarding operation," Dave told Tom Bradley, a local rancher who called about housing 2 bulls during a pasture renovation project. "That was a one-time emergency situation." "But you've got the pen space and it's convenient to the feed store," Tom pressed. "I'd pay standard boarding rates." Dave had considered the possibility. The back pen could accommodate temporary livestock housing, and local ranchers occasionally needed short-term solutions for various management situations. But expanding into livestock boarding would require different insurance, additional licensing, and regulatory compliance he wasn't prepared to handle. "Tom, I appreciate the interest, but we're staying focused on feed and supplies. There are 3 legitimate boarding facilities within 20 miles that can handle your needs properly." The conversation highlighted how one unusual incident could generate business opportunities, but also how important it was to stick to established business models rather than chasing every potential revenue stream. Carol Morrison was tracking the financial impact of their overnight bull hosting. The $200 compensation from Premier Genetics had covered the premium hay costs, but the real value was the networking that resulted from the incident. "We've had 7 new customers this week," Carol told Dave. "People heard about how professionally we handled the situation, and they wanted to see what we're about." The new customers were primarily purchasing routine feed and supplements, but their average order size was 15% higher than typical new customers. Word-of-mouth recommendations carried significant weight in farming communities, and Premier Genetics had specifically mentioned Morrison Feed Supply's cooperation in their follow-up communications with other customers. "It's interesting how solving someone else's problem professionally can become marketing for your own business," Mayor Dave observed. 3 weeks after the incident, Sarah Chen from Premier Genetics called Dave with an update on their system improvements. "The new verification protocols are working exactly as projected," she reported. "We've prevented 2 potential delivery errors just this month, and customer satisfaction scores have improved because people feel more confident about delivery accuracy." "Any other similar mix-ups?" Dave asked. "One delivery to the wrong Johnson Ranch in Oklahoma, but our new verification system caught it before the truck left our facility. The driver called the customer directly to confirm GPS coordinates, and they realized the address error immediately." The conversation reinforced how small operational improvements could prevent expensive problems. Premier Genetics had invested $8,000 in system upgrades to avoid recurring costs that were already approaching $5,000 annually in delivery error corrections. David Morrison, the rancher who had originally made the address error, had also made changes to his own ordering procedures. He now used a checklist when placing online orders, particularly for expensive purchases, and had programmed his correct address and phone number into his browser's autofill settings. "I learned to slow down and double-check information before hitting submit," he told Dave during a chance meeting at a local equipment auction. That 5-minute mistake cost a lot of people time and effort. The incident had become a case study in how simple human errors could cascade through business systems, but also how those same systems could be improved to catch and correct mistakes before they became expensive problems. Morrison Feed Supply returned to its normal operations, selling feed, supplements, and equipment to local agricultural operations. The back pen remained empty, except for occasional equipment staging, and Dave had no plans to expand into livestock services despite continued inquiries. The most significant lasting change was Dave's increased attention to accuracy in customer orders and delivery addresses. He had added verification steps to his own business processes, understanding that preventing problems was always more efficient than solving them after they occurred. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from other people's mistakes, especially when you handle the consequences professionally and learn what you can from the experience. Dave Morrison was updating his quarterly inventory reports when Carol walked in with a package from the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Inside was a certificate recognizing Morrison Feed Supply as a cooperating business in their livestock transport emergency response program. "What's this about?" Dave asked, reading the official documentation. "Remember when that state inspector called last month asking about our experience with the Premier Genetics incident? Apparently, they're creating a database of businesses that can provide emergency livestock housing when transport delays occur." The certificate was largely ceremonial, but it came with practical benefits: priority access to state veterinary services, liability coverage for emergency situations, and inclusion in a statewide network of cooperating facilities. Dave had not requested the recognition, but his professional handling of the bull delivery error had brought it to the attention of state agricultural officials. "Are we committing to anything?" Dave asked, reviewing the accompanying paperwork. "Just willingness to consider emergency situations on a case-by-case basis. No requirements, no automatic obligations. They need facilities scattered around the state that can handle temporary livestock housing when regular systems fail." Dave considered the implications. Emergency livestock housing happened perhaps once or twice per year in their area, usually during severe weather or transport breakdowns. The liability coverage and veterinary access could benefit his regular business operations, and there were no mandatory commitments. "All right, we'll keep the certification active. If something comes up, we'll evaluate it then." 2 weeks later, they received their first request. A transport company had a truck breakdown 30 miles away, carrying 12 head of commercial cattle bound for a processing facility. The cattle needed temporary housing for 18 hours while replacement transport was arranged. "This is different from the bull situation," Carol pointed out. "Commercial cattle, not breeding stock, lower value but more animals." Dave checked their backlot capacity and called the transport company for details. The cattle were healthy, properly documented, and insured. The transport company would provide feed and water, and their insurance covered any potential issues. A veterinarian would inspect the animals upon arrival and departure. "We can handle 12 head for one night," Dave told the transport coordinator. "But I want all documentation in advance, and your vet on site during unloading." The process went smoothly. 12 commercial cattle spent one night in Morrison Feed Supply's expanded holding area were inspected twice by a qualified veterinarian and continued to their destination the following morning. Dave charged $15 per head for the overnight accommodation, standard rates for emergency livestock housing. $180 for 20 hours of work, Carol calculated. Not enough to build a business around, but reasonable compensation for an occasional service. The experience highlighted how their original incident with Premier Genetics had evolved into a minor but legitimate business capability. They weren't actively marketing livestock services, but they could accommodate emergency situations when approached directly. Jennifer Walsh from Premier Genetics called Dave with an update on their improved verification systems. "Our delivery error rate has dropped to 0.7% since implementing the new protocols," she reported. The Morrison incident was the catalyst for changes that have prevented 15 potential delivery errors so far this year. Any major problems avoided? A $120,000 breeding bull that would have been delivered to a residential address instead of a ranch, and a shipment of exotic cattle that would have gone to the wrong state entirely. The verification calls caught both errors before the trucks left our facility. The conversation reinforced how one person's mistake could lead to systemic improvements that prevented multiple future problems. Premier Genetics had transformed a costly incident into an opportunity to upgrade their operational procedures. David Morrison, the rancher who had made the original address error, had become more careful about online transactions in general. He now used verification checklists for any purchase over $1,000 and had implemented similar double-checking procedures in his own ranch management software. "That expensive mistake taught me to slow down on important transactions," he told Dave during a chance meeting at a farm equipment sale. "I've probably prevented 3 or 4 similar errors in other areas of my business just by being more methodical about data entry." The incident had created a ripple effect of improved practices across multiple businesses and individuals. Each person involved had identified specific ways to prevent similar problems in their own operations. Morrison Feed Supply's customer base had stabilized at about 8% higher than before the incident, primarily due to word-of-mouth recommendations about their professional handling of unexpected situations. The new customers were steady purchasers of routine feed and supplies, generating approximately $12,000 in additional annual revenue. The networking value of handling problems professionally is something they don't teach in business school, Carol observed. People remember competence under pressure. Dave had also noticed changes in how he approached his own business operations. He now double-checked customer information more carefully, maintained better documentation of unusual situations, and had developed protocols for handling requests outside his normal service area. The bull incident taught me that small businesses need to be prepared for unexpected situations, Dave told his insurance agent during their annual policy review. You can't predict what problems will walk through your door, but you can prepare to handle them professionally. 6 months after the original delivery error, Morrison Feed Supply had returned to its core business of selling feed and agricultural supplies. The backlot occasionally housed emergency livestock situations 3 times in 6 months, but these remained minor additions to their primary operations. The lasting changes were subtle but significant: improved verification procedures, better documentation practices, emergency response capabilities, and a reputation for reliability that had modestly expanded their customer base. Sometimes the most valuable business lessons come from other people's mistakes, especially when you handle the consequences professionally and learn what you can apply to your own operations. The expensive bull delivery error had cost Premier Genetics money, but it had created value for everyone involved through improved systems and procedures. Morrison Feed Supply never became a livestock operation, and Dave Morrison never became a cattle expert. They remained exactly what they had always been: a reliable feed store that happened to handle one unusual situation professionally enough to benefit from the experience. Dave Morrison was reviewing the quarterly reports when he realized their emergency livestock services had generated more revenue than expected. In the past 6 months since receiving their state certification, they'd handled 15 emergency situations, earning $2,140 in additional income. The emergency calls are becoming predictable, Carol noted, checking their appointment calendar. 1 or 2 situations per month, mostly during peak transport seasons. What had started as an accidental service was evolving into a reliable business component. Transport companies now included Morrison Feed Supply in their emergency contact lists, and their reputation for professional handling had spread through industry networks. Their phone rang with another emergency request. A livestock transport truck had broken down 20 miles away, carrying 8 commercial cattle that needed temporary housing while repairs were completed.
"We can accommodate 8 head for up to 48 hours, Dave told the dispatcher. "Standard emergency rates apply, and we'll need your insurance information before unloading." The conversation had become routine. Dave had developed standardized protocols for intake procedures, documentation requirements, and billing practices. What had once been an improvised response to an unexpected situation was now a systematic business operation.
2 hours later, the transport company's truck arrived with 8 Black Angus cattle. Dave supervised the unloading while Carol completed the paperwork that documented animal condition, transport details, and liability coverage. "You've got this process down to a science," observed Mike Rodriguez, the transport company owner who had personally overseen the emergency transfer. "Most places that handle emergency livestock situations are either too expensive or too informal. You've found the right balance." Mike's comment highlighted something Dave had noticed but not fully considered. Most emergency livestock facilities were either large commercial operations with high overhead costs or informal arrangements with inadequate documentation and insurance coverage. Morrison Feed Supply occupied a middle ground that apparently met a genuine market need. "We're thinking about expanding our capacity," Dave mentioned, as they watched the cattle settle into the holding area. "Demand has been higher than our current facilities can handle." "What kind of expansion?" "Additional holding pens, improved water systems, maybe covered shelter for weather protection. Nothing elaborate, but enough to handle larger groups or multiple simultaneous emergencies." Mike's interest was immediate. "How much larger capacity are you talking about?" "Current maximum is 15 head. We're considering upgrades that would allow us to handle 30 to 40 animals simultaneously." "That would be significant for our operations. We run routes through this area twice weekly, and breakdown situations sometimes involve larger groups than you can currently accommodate." The conversation continued as they completed the transfer paperwork. Mike explained that his company operated 12 trucks covering routes across 4 states, with emergency situations occurring approximately once monthly per truck. Most breakdown incidents involved 5 to 20 animals, but peak season could see situations requiring temporary housing for 30 or more cattle. There's definitely demand for what you're providing, Mike confirmed. The question is whether expanding makes business sense for you. After Mike left, Dave and Carol discussed the expansion possibilities. The upgrades would cost approximately $12,000, but could potentially double their emergency services capacity. Based on current demand patterns, the investment could pay for itself within 18 months. We should research this properly, Carol suggested. Talk to our accountant, check zoning requirements, get detailed cost estimates for the facility improvements. Dave agreed. Their original entry into emergency livestock services had been accidental, but any significant expansion should be planned carefully with proper financial analysis and regulatory compliance. The next week, Dave met with their accountant to review the financial implications of facility expansion. The numbers were encouraging but required careful consideration of seasonal demand variations and potential competition from larger commercial facilities. Emergency livestock services generate higher profit margins than feed sales, the accountant noted, but they're also more dependent on external factors like transport industry conditions and weather patterns. Dave also consulted with their insurance agent about coverage requirements for expanded livestock operations. The agent confirmed that their current policy could be modified to cover larger capacity operations, but premiums would increase proportionally with the additional risk exposure. The key question, the insurance agent said, is whether you want to remain a feed store with occasional livestock services or evolve into a livestock services business that also sells feed. The distinction was important for business planning, tax considerations, and regulatory compliance. Each model had different requirements and different risk profiles. Carol had been researching zoning and permit requirements for expanded livestock facilities. We need a conditional use permit from the county, but that's mostly a formality for our type of operation. No environmental impact issues, no neighbor objections likely. 3 weeks of research confirmed that facility expansion was feasible both financially and legally. The remaining question was whether Morrison Feed Supply wanted to commit to becoming a more significant player in the emergency livestock services market. Here's what I think, Dave told Carol after reviewing all the research. We start with modest expansion. Add capacity for 25 head instead of 40, test the market response, and evaluate further growth based on actual demand. The compromise approach would require a $7,500 investment rather than $12,000. Reduce financial risk while still allowing meaningful capacity increases. They could always expand further if demand justified additional investment. That makes sense, Carol agreed. Growth based on demonstrated need rather than speculation about potential market size. Dave called Mike Rodriguez to discuss their expansion plans and gauge interest from transport companies. Mike's response was immediately positive, and he offered to provide letters of intent from other transport operators who regularly use the highway routes serviced by Morrison Feed Supply. Letters of intent from transport companies will help with our planning and might be useful if we ever need financing for additional expansions, Carol noted. 6 months after receiving their emergency livestock certification, Morrison Feed Supply was preparing to make their largest facility investment since opening the business. The expansion would formalize their evolution from a purely retail operation into a hybrid business model serving both individual customers and commercial transport companies. The decision had grown logically from their accidental experience hosting an expensive bull through systematic development of emergency service capabilities to planned expansion based on demonstrated market demand. Sometimes the most successful business growth happens gradually, one professional response at a time, until accumulated experience reveals opportunities that were never part of the original business plan.